All right, we are on air, and this study session, the town board study session, February 10th, 2026 is in session. Our first thing I think I'll mention, we're two trustees down today, both for the study session and the regular board meeting. Trustee Lancaster and Trustee Youngland are both unavailable. So we have 5. It is a appropriate quorum. We will be able to vote in the regular meeting and go for other consensus in the study session. We also have a special guest up here at the EVIC Gala fundraiser a couple months ago. Dennis won the Mayor for a Day. It's kind of like bring your daughter to work or your son to work or whatever. And he has been with me since 7 a.m. this morning, poor guy, gone through a variety of meetings. It's been very interesting. He's provided some really good input, too. I've learned things from him today. And so Dennis is the chaplain for the police department, in case you don't know him. And so that's a handy force to have up here, too. We have the power of some more powerful things than we usually have up here. So we're on our way. The first item is the Parks Master Plan update. I think we have Mr. Berg is going to talk to us.
Yeah. Okay, now we're official. Good evening, Mayor, trustees. Actually, I have a really easy gig today. Just up here to introduce our consultants from Design Workshops, and they're going to go through what we've done so far as outreach, the survey, the different pop-ups, and then kind of outline our goals to move forward in the draft master plan. So I'd like to introduce Ashley, and then on virtually is Anna from Design Workshops.
All right.
How loud is Pam, just to test her audio?
Anna?
Can she test it?
It's Anna, Mayor, and she's on the call.
I think I'm good. Thank you
Yeah.
for having us.
Yeah, that's good. Good volume. Okay.
All right. And
Great.
do I need to do anything to launch our presentation, or is that you? Okay. Well, hello, and thank you for having us today. We are a landscape architecture and planning firm. You've been coordinating with some of our colleagues on the development code as well. But Anna and I are here to talk through the progress we've made on the Parks and Open Spaces Master Plan in the last many months now. And we're here to get your feedback and hear your areas of prioritization, things that resonate you as we moved into the draft of the plan. So for today's workshop, we just want to cover an overview of the process, including all the community engagement we've done so far and what we have planned coming up. Dive into the plan framework and spend quite a bit of our time today on that. And that will inform the focus and direction of the plan going forward. So we started this plan process back last spring, and we launched with a series of focus groups. And I'll get into the summary of that. That was in your packet. We've been spending time just getting to know your parks and open space system through inventory, looking at assessments and other plans you have going on in the town and how those apply, and finding little touch points along the way to connect with the community, such as pop-up tables, the focus groups, and then we had a survey that was live for much of the fall. So we are now into the second phase, which we're starting to explore the ideas, the framework that will go into the plan, and looking forward to following up this session with planning our next outreach with a bit of a more focus on families and a little bit of youth engagement as shown on the screen. And then for the remainder of the spring, we're going to be formulating this into a draft plan that we hope to share out later in the spring. So why a parks and open spaces plan? Historically, you have not had a documentation of the parks and open spaces within the framework of a specific plan. So you've provided for the foresight of these spaces and other planning efforts you've done that they've been accounted for. But this is our chance now to establish a clearly defined overview on everything the Parks Division in particular does and oversees for the community. It's a chance to document where the community is seeing needs arise address community change and future changes that are anticipated, and providing approaches to prioritize future investments. The next slide is really a kind of overview of the table of contents of what the document will entail. So we are well into Chapter 1, which is just understanding the existing conditions, moving into Chapter 2 of some of the analysis work that I'll go over in a minute, and documentation of the outreach. And then Chapter 3 is where we're moving into, and want to get your thoughts on the framework we're going to be sharing. So the study area we're looking at, the town does not have a park zone formally, so the spaces we've been asked to look at more specifically are a lot of the smaller pocket parks and plaza spaces within the downtown area. We've categorized those from downtown parks west and east just for a little bit of ease of management of all the smaller spaces right now. We're looking at the natural areas of Centennial Open Space at No Willows and the Thumb Open Space, and also have included in the study the fish hatchery property in Scott Ponds area. We're not giving much focus in this plan to Stanley Park and Estes Golf Course, but they are accounted for. And here's just a zoom in of kind of the downtown study area. So within our analysis, we have inventoried the existing spaces for the amenities and features each one has. We don't really need to go into detail of that, but just kind of documentation of that. We've done some initial mapping with GIS data that shows, in this case, the development patterns over time through a development intensity map. And we're starting to recognize that it looks like we had some multifamily housing we left off on some of these mappings. So we'll be looking at that after this session. And that factors into the walkshed analysis that we did, that we'll need to get those multifamily developments put in here. But initially, we have the 15-minute walking distances of the single-family residential units and some of the multifamily that we mapped. We also have looked at some of the ecological hazards that exist around the downtown core, and our study area limits with wildfire severity, steep slopes, and floodplains. And this will start to factor into some of the work we do in recognizing that parks and open space play a role in resiliency planning. So some of the key takeaways of the mapping exercises and the other work we've done so far show the importance of the downtown river corridor spaces within your system. A large number of households are within a good walking distance of a park or open space at 76%, possibly greater than that when we add in additional housing, and a high level understanding of the environmental constraints surrounding the system. But I do want to move now into what we really heard from the community, which were the really big takeaways in the first few phases. So to date, like I said, we've had focused group discussions, several pop-up events held throughout the fall and late summer, and an online survey. And the focus groups we met with in July, we had 26 people overall invited to attend. We met with staff and operations and dug into some of their challenges and some of the opportunities they see. Then we met with community representatives and stakeholders on the topics of natural resources and the environment, events, culture, and visitation, and how that impacts park spaces, and outdoor recreation. And some of what we heard in those conversations are the Parks Division staff is a little under-resourced, but they are also an incredibly skilled and dedicated team, with being some concerns about the impacts if a long-term team member were to leave and each vital role that every individual is playing on that team. We heard a little bit about there's a lot of organizations in this community that are working towards the same goals, but maybe not together or talking together and communicating what their goals are. So a little bit of redundancy that could be causing inefficiencies or could be merged together for some really positive opportunities. There was some themes around managing visitors and resident expectations, and especially in the months where things feel a little overcrowded, or some of the spaces maybe having too many events in some locations, not enough in others. So a thought or consideration to dispersing visitors and attracting to other locations where there's more comfortable carrying capacity. We heard a little bit about responding more to use getting picked up more year-round, so not just a high summer season anymore, but really spreading into the shoulder seasons. A lot of conversation about trails and connecting neighborhoods to downtown and parks. So our study isn't specifically studying trails, but it is an aspect of connectivity, especially when it comes to youth and access from neighborhoods. So making sure that youth have access to the parks and open spaces. And then some discussion about expanding the idea of pocket parks or smaller spaces closer to proximity of neighborhoods. From here, we did the community survey that was launched September 1st and opened through November 3rd, so about 2 months. We had 665 surveys completed, 700 responses to open-ended questions. So a lot of this survey was write-in responses. We wanted to hear what are your needs, what are your thoughts, what are your ideas. We had this advertised through media channels, but also we had yard signs around town that you might have seen for the duration of this with QR codes. So you could also stand in a space and respond directly to your feelings on that particular space. The survey we had good participation. It was mainly full-time residents, so 48% were full-time residents of the town, but others were invited to share their input. And much of an adult population over 55 plus, so 59% of the respondents were of an older age demographic, and for that reason, we want to do a little more targeted outreach towards young families in the community and also youth.
We have more dogs than kids.
The dogs responded. Oh, actually, I responded to that question wrong. That wasn't who.
Those are the ones that have dogs in their household. So.
That's the demographics, not who responded to the survey. But that said, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but we did have primarily the older population responding to the survey, and we want to work on balancing that out. I don't think I want to hit too much on this slide. The next one has a little bit of, one of the questions started to get an idea of where people would prioritize investment. I think by the nature of the people that choose to live in this community, there is a strong feeling for open space and trails. And so that came up strongly throughout the survey summary. And it's something that we need to understand what the town's role in providing, especially for open space, would be, but that is a value of the community. Another priority was getting more parks within a walking or biking distance of the neighborhoods, making sure that the existing assets are really cared for, and reduce or sustain current park and open space focus. It was what came in as a lower priority.
Maybe the fact that increasing maintenance and repair is ranked kind of low means people think it's generally in good maintenance and repair. Yeah.
Yeah, especially with the open-ended responses, we did hear that people are very. Sorry, I didn't know she was trying to talk. People are happy with the current maintenance, especially in the downtown where everything is kept so beautiful.
All of our questions that were about the specific spaces that people answered, they did respond that the condition and the maintenance is being done, they think is meeting a lot of their expectations. So that was helpful to back that up as well, where the priorities lie. They think you're doing well with the care.
And I think the full survey summary was shared with you, so you have a lot more of that detail available too. Anna's now going to spend some time talking about the evolution of the plan and the framework of topics we've been developing to kind of organize what the draft plan goes forward. So we'll give that a try. Hopefully you can all hear her well enough.
And you're going to continue to share the slides there, right? There we go. Very good. So the plan framework is really what's to be done about this? Let's organize the content to be able to share how things are put together in this plan overall. So we are organizing this with a hierarchy of first plan themes. Those are the organizing principles or future goals. Below that are some directive things about the goals of what you hope to achieve. And that's followed by more specifics about strategies. And that may include listing of opportunities or how we want to achieve those goals. Lastly, the most specific element of this are action items. So those will be specific steps. And that will develop later on as we develop more for the implementation chapter to support these themes and goals that I'll share with you tonight. That may include things like capital improvement projects, for example, very specific what you need to invest in for the future, as well as some conceptual plans of what would be desirable on particular sites. So that's how we'll move through the organization of providing those recommendations or the big picture for the future of your system. For the next slide. So we've organized this around the 5 themes that really emerged throughout this engagement and our analysis. The first one is the downtown experience. I'll walk through each of these individually, but that one we really put first. Oh, go back to the last slide. Thank you. We really put that one first because it seemed to be a really foundational element of what was brought up over and over again about your parks being a central piece of your downtown. The next one is coexistence of visitors and wildlife. After that, we have a theme around parks engaging everyone. Next is natural areas and open spaces. And the last theme is maintenance and operations. And as we go through these, you sort of see that these are the categories that individual strategies and actions fall under. And we're trying to make sure everything has a home of where it lives, of a theme that really helps organize how this plan will be put together. And go to the next slide, please. Okay, we'll start off with the downtown experience. This was an exciting discovery of just how meaningful parks are to the downtown, that they really do create what is thought of as Estes Park, this linear park experience. But there's a lot of room for improvement in that experience downtown. Some of those include really making that a continual, all-encompassing experience when people arrive to when they leave, or as a community experiences these spaces. And that includes amenities for comfort, like shade, benches, picnic areas. We heard from a lot of people about how important that interaction with the river is, and there are a number of opportunities we identified to improve either access to water or just viewing areas and how people experience seeing that space. You already have a good amount of art and interaction opportunities and beautifications of the downtown, but of course there's room for improvement in addition, and thinking long-term about the next 10, 20 years of that evolution of your art and interactions downtown. It came up often, this idea that the parks are really this sort of patio to the shops. They have a connection to commerce as well as your festivals and events and markets, which is an interesting way to look at it. So we'll be looking at where are some areas for improvement with that relationship as well. Wayfinding and connectivity is another message that came up often. So we'll be looking at that's about gateways, signage, linkages to neighborhoods into the downtown, and how we get to these spaces and how we interact with them and find our way. Another component of this is your community values around sustainability. And there are some really intensive uses of areas, and so we'll be looking at how to really sustain resources and think about that long-term care and maintenance. Lastly, park improvements overall, we're looking at some site needs of individual spaces, the different amenities and renovations that will be needed. And the next slide gets at that a bit too, of some specifics. So we're looking at potential of a master plan for the experience from the visitor center to the parking garage to the river. That includes trailheads, pictures, riverbank stabilization. It's also looking at the paving materials. This was a big component of that ADA access piece, but also just how anyone is getting around, strollers, whatever the needs are. Of a lot of your materials are degraded or just not allowing for that movement that people need for mobility throughout. Then play features, looking at updating those, thinking about universal accessibility, and just some of the latest in play components to really fit your context and be representative of your community. Some other places we're looking at with recommendations, there's potential that Baldwin Park and the Moraine Avenue Highway 36 traffic circle, there could be some, it was identified, there's some opportunity to make some improvements there, and then as well as renovate data spaces that can offer more amenities for users. So we've mentioned a few there. It's kind of a starting point.
So these are, sorry, I'm loud. These are ideas we're testing or putting in front of you to just get some idea of what could fall under each theme. Just based on some of the initial things we've heard.
Okay. And the second theme is coexistence of visitors and wildlife. If you can't tell, these themes are really tailored to Estes Park. We don't have this in many of the other park system plans we create, but this kept coming up over and over again as this component of sometimes clash, and also a need to manage the thoughts around how our interactions occurring and how do we react or be prepared for what visitors and wildlife being together in one place. So that includes a look at how are we looking at human conflicts or create safety considerations, kind of directing visitors to particular places or directing them with education of how to interact. Looking at the human impacts on the park system. Where is there overcrowding, overvisitation? What do we need to do to address trash and cleanliness? As well as thinking about all the different partnerships that come into play, such as with the wildlife management component within this theme. I think you can go to the next one. So this is just a starting place of some considerations for what might be involved with this action steps. Could be about reinforcing native ecology, park spaces, wildlife deterring landscape treatments, and engagement of CPW officers are some examples.
So this is just an acknowledgement that the Parks Division is not managing wildlife. That is not their role, but there is some interface with all of that.
Okay. Next, what up parks engaging everyone? So this is looking at current and future resident park needs and thinking about how physical connectivity is a component that has come up quite a bit of how do people get to these spaces in a car. And also we want to dig in further into what it means for youth mobility and teens getting to these spaces. Additionally, we discussed quite a bit with focus groups that came up as well as in the survey of thinking all year round of all the seasonal activities and how the spaces could be used. And are there some amenities that can help enhance that? And then lastly, adaptive sports and accessibility. You have a really prime opportunity here to be a center for adaptive sports and enhance that going forward for the next 10, 20 years of thinking about what does it mean to have that opportunity in this outdoor setting. Okay. These were some additional examples that we were thinking through. I won't go over all of them, but some examples of what it might mean for parks to be engaging, some particular actions that might be taken. For the next one. The natural areas, the open spaces, we listed in that sort of those first slides about which parks does this apply to, such as Scott's Ponds, Fish Hatchery, some of the underserved neighborhoods that they're kind of feeling those growth pressures, and you might be looking at on those edges what land to conserve. And so that's a look at overall conservation management. What is the town's role in managing these spaces, taking care of them, acquisitions? How does this play with the land trusts and their partnership? Next is thinking about that resources management of your particular properties and ensuring that you are conserving those in an appropriate way and have a really strong care plan for them, as well as the community's interest in making sure that your spaces are serving some additional purposes around resilience. Wildfire, flooding, native ecologies, forestry, riparian, habitat, and weeds are just some of those topics that we know are important to looking at your spaces and making sure that they are providing those co-benefits. It's since this is a 10 to 20-year plan looking out way in the future, we'll be strategizing about, are there locations that future acquisitions should be prioritized overall? And what is your relationship with managing conservation easements? Is that a role you should be playing further into the future? Okay, we go to the next. We just have this as a starting place. We know the fish hatchery is one of those that people are looking at, having the abundance of natural areas within it, and what could that be for the future of education, interpretation, and recreation. Okay, last up is the maintenance and operations. This is a key component to just be very thoughtful and proactive in planning for the staffing needs, knowing that you have fairly low resources overall for that maintenance. It is really remarkable to us in all of our studies of how park systems work, of just how well your staff is caring for these spaces and the intensity of the landscape features that they put in every year with such low number of staff. So we'll be developing more evaluation that helps communicate that, not just now, the current state, but the needs going forward. That includes look at equipment, buildings, maintenance, facilities, thinking about capital planning, your annual budgets to invest in different ideas that are being put into this plan to make sure it becomes a reality, that you have that linkage proactively thinking about your budget compared to the future projects that are anticipated. We're looking into the details of different aspects of your funding, such as event impact fees and how the park system grows over time. Will there be other contributions that you'll be looking at to make sure your parks match up with your population growth? In addition, we'll give some advisement about how to modernize your system. We're completing some benchmark comparisons to other places so you can really see how do you stack up compared to others, and does that help you target a little bit better where you want to take this into the future? And lastly, the different policy components that will be engaged in this plan. The ones that have come up so far is the need for some recommendations to start things around e-bike policies, non-motorized transportation, and dogs as well, given how many people we know have dogs in your community. Okay, and so on the last one here, just some other potentials of what we think might be some action items to appear within this plan that may come up within it. So with that, we want to turn it back over to you and ask just a couple of questions here for your guidance. One is, do you have any feedback for us on these plan themes or aspects of what we share that you could see a need for improving upon this? Do you agree with everything included, or some aspects that you'd like to see some changes? Another item you might want to discuss is the desired role for the Parks Division over the next decade, especially considering that component that's popped up about open space and the community desire for additional conserved lands. And then we want, overall, is there anything we've missed? Anything that you're hoping appears in this parks plan? Any priorities that you're thinking about improvements for the next decade or two? So with that, we'll turn it all over to you all for discussion.
I love our parks, our parks group, and I can't, I'm looking forward to spring, although I'd like to get 12 feet of snow before that happens, so we know how desperate that is at this point. But the beauty in town in the summer and really year round, I mean, we do the best we can through a dry, windy winter. Usually we have some kind of covering that, gives it that winter beauty, but summer is just more than a blaze of, shouldn't use the word blaze, is just glorious, absolutely glorious. So I really love the work that folks do.
Thank you very much for the thorough presentation. Just a couple of thoughts. One is, well, I'll start with, I really appreciate the highlight, and I think you mentioned this came a lot from community members, of the connectivity of our trail systems and parks. That's so, I just keeps coming up as we look at all the different infrastructure improvements and projects we've made throughout the community over the past decade and how we can make sure those are all tying together. So really appreciated that. And also, I had written down adjustments for climate change, which I think you guys called resiliency, which was a really great way to put it. So I appreciate that too, as we're anticipating continued weather pattern changes over the coming years, how our park strategy, and I know our staff is so on top of that already with the choices they make for what gets planted and how we manage our grounds, but really appreciated that. I wanted to voice my support for the staff development piece, since it's such a huge, our parks are such a huge aspect of enhancing quality of life for our residents and of course the visitor experience, that what we can do to support and retain our staff in that capacity and help their development. I'm very interested in that in the ultimate master plan. And I think it's worth mentioning that this is a great way, we talk a lot about balance as a board and how we can find balance with development and redevelopment in our community, as well as with the open spaces and trails and wildlife. And I think this is a great way for us to kind of put our money where our mouth is with that balance and really enhancing those spaces. So I'd like to see a lot of that. I didn't see a couple of questions or maybe considerations for the next round. We are lucky up here to not have to consider a lot of major safety concerns. You can walk around late at night here, it's a small community. But I'd be interested in an element or addressing or consideration of safety when it comes, especially when it comes to any changes to park spaces or potential acquisitions of park spaces, and how we design those or balance those with separation so people can have, their time with their family and friends versus isolation physically, making sure we're not setting up spaces where there can be unsavory or unsafe behavior. So I just wanted to toss that out there. And then finally, I'd be interested next time it doesn't even have to be presented, but I'm sure there's been a lot of review in your foundation building and information gathering of like the downtown master plan and the comp plan. And so I'm curious about how all of that kind of ties together to hopefully be working together. And then specifically seeing kind of the sub-master plans throughout this, like maybe Baldwin Park mini master plan or all of those, just kind of how all of that ties together. There's a lot of plans that, we have to consider as a town, and making sure they're in concert is of great interest to me. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. That was a good presentation. And you don't know the parks people as well as we do, but it is remarkable how much they do with how apparently little they have, because my impression is that there are a lot more people working there than I think there probably are. I will tell you that your yellow signs by the Scott Ponds were very effective. They created a sense of alarm that there was impending development. So whatever you do, anything to stimulate conversation and to get people involved. I think that the results on your survey show that something worked for your outreach, and so I appreciate that. I just jotted 3 or 4 things down that caught my ear. I wonder about play features that we add and artwork that we add. Are they distractions from what we have and what we're selling? So I would call for balance between yellow metal sunflowers and this view. And when we go downtown, I think, is Peacock Park the one with the Columbine? Yeah. Is that, okay, all right. We're having a high-level discussion on where that was. That's a pretty sculpture, so I think there's a balance, but I think that we can go too far one way, and I've heard that from others about anybody in any city can have that kind of artwork, but no one has this. So I think that there's a real need to balance our desire or this compelling government world need to grow and to add. I think we have to balance that with our natural surroundings. And instead of adding adding attractions and adding interesting points along the walking path, focusing on the natural attractions that we have. So I would be conservative adding things to see in our community because the community is the thing to see. So I hope that we would feature those things. Instead of adding attractions, we would showcase what we have. I think there's a lot of opportunity for engagement here that we are going to be involved in this master plan. I think it's important to the community that we focus on what matters to us and why we moved here and not necessarily add a whole lot that will be a distraction. So thanks for your work on this.
I'm very impressed with the nature of engagement you've got. I don't think we've heard any of our surveys return as many responses. So that is very impressive and very helpful. I do think you're wise to go on youth engagement and really stress that because obviously, first of all, they rated the parks lower than the older people did. They probably use the parks more than the older people do. And so I'd really like to have you hit that hard. And in that regard, I'm curious that you didn't include Stanley Park in any of this. And I don't know if that was a direction from staff or what, but it strikes me as the youth of our community used Stanley Park a lot. It's close to the school, it's close to the event center, it's close to the community center. And maybe you can respond.
Yeah, it's mostly because it's run and operated by the rec department.
Okay,
While the town owns the property,
We don't
we
run
don't manage. They have a separate master plan.
Sure.
And what they do is more recreation based. And
Sure.
it's we kind of figured the downtown area was our mainstay. That's what the parks
well, that makes
focuses
sense.
on.
Sure, thank you.
If I could, I'd also add, they completed a master plan, the rec district did a couple of years ago. And that gives a lot of direction for what they anticipate are the improvements to that park. And that included engagement as well. And I know that because we were part of that process. Ashley and I helped with that plan creation.
So we supported that process. We did the last master plan, but also they just
parks.
released a survey right before we started this project. So that was publicly accessible and things we can reference for understanding what's going on in their realm too.
Yeah, it seems to me we ought to have some sort of integration though between those plans.
That's
And
right.
because
Yeah,
what
and-
we do affects them, what they do affects us.
Right.
Yeah.
And Tom attended our focus groups at the onset and gave feedback that way as well,
Yeah.
the director.
And I learned of a park I'd never heard of, Peacock Park. There must be a sculpture there, is that? Tall Columbine, I don't remember that. I'll have to look up there. We hide it well, yeah. In any event,
Travis, I think, had a comment on the master plan.
Yeah, Mayor
I'm
Trustee
sorry.
Brown, I do want to clarify that the rec district does have a master plan, which they keep updated, that is separate from our Stanley Park plan in some regards and has been combined in others. So they are actively working towards a master plan that has been developed through a public process. So we have done that work. We chose not to redo that work
Sure.
because they are chasing that and they're making improvements. You've probably seen the pickleball courts over there, the new basketball courts.
yeah.
And then there are ongoing conversations about improvements to the parking area for the ball fields.
I just think in part of our master plan, there ought to be some at least reference integration, something to that, because that's really part of the community as well. One last comment. I like the idea that was mentioned here of more benches and picnic tables. Shade, I'm not so sure about, but benches and picnic tables, it does seem like there could be more without really impacting adversely the park, particularly probably on the park here and right next to us. It makes it more inviting if you don't have to sit on a blanket to enjoy the park. And on top of that, maybe some bike racks you might consider too. Because this, particularly as we get interconnectivity with the trails, seems like that might be a good thing to consider adding on. But by and large, very impressed with the scope of this, certainly how much citizen engagement you've got. And I think you'll really make this better with more youth engagement. So I appreciate you going in that direction. Thank you.
The one comment about staffing, I assume that town administrator and director of public works and Supervisor Berg are looking at that and evaluating, if the great works that is being done with unsustainable Herculean efforts. Well, in order to keep those good works going, there may have to be reweighing of that, so.
Mayor, can I just add? I overlooked a significant point that's come up for me in the last couple of years. And we've talked about a project where a path would go along the river behind where Poppy's is or Dairy Queen is on the south side of the river. And I've heard both sides very strongly, why would we cut this mountain to put in a bike path? And other people who say we must have a bike path to connect everything. There's kind of a path there. So I think that we have to be really cognizant of trade-offs in connecting everything and losing what we have, 1,000,000 years worth of rocks versus a new concrete path. So I think that that's going to be a hot discussion item in the development of our system here.
Those are pretty young rocks if they're only 1,000,000 years old, But good, interesting point. I've heard that before, and even anyway. I was a runner for 35 years and was really looking forward to all the connectivity and everything. So, the Fall River stuff and other pieces that are connecting up the missing links. Gosh, wouldn't it be great to have a loop around the gulches too, and, have all that stuff connected for the bicyclists, the runners, the walkers and stuff. So I'm always excited when we see progress on that. Obviously, the floods slowed it down and the fires slowed it down and COVID slowed it down and everything. But gradually over time, we are developing a nice little bike system and hiking system. So great, thanks. Any other comments? Any other questions? Are we good?
Yeah,
Yeah, great work. Yeah,
we'll work towards the
yeah,
draft plan.
path, the right path that you're moving to, right, yeah, I agree. Okay,
Thank
thanks
you
so
for your
much.
time.
That was the only topic we had, and I saw that, before the dinner stuff, and I think a bunch of stuff came in here somewhere. So we are going to break for dinner and then come back at 5:30 to discuss the water master plan. So we're on hold.
Because I was like, why would we do that? That's Brian. Hey, Brian. Why do we call it Peacock Park?
I always heard like it was an old gas station.
Was it Peacock gas station?
Pixie Gas was on Moraine
Yeah, Pixie Gas.
and Bob's Amico, but I don't know.
I just don't see a lot of, natural peacocks running around.
We can change that.
T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Are we back on, Bunny? How do I know the difference? The light was on already. Are we
We
good?
are back on, Mayor.
Yeah, okay. This study session of the Town Board of Estes Park is back in session. We have Director Bergston going to talk to us about the Water Master Plan.
Thank you, Mayor, Trustees, for having us tonight. This is an exciting point. We've been working on this Water Plan Master Plan update. I can tell that, Marie, I really appreciate that.
We
That
like
positive
water.
energy. That positive energy is great. So tonight we are going to present the Water Master Plan in a high-level overview, but we do ask that you consider giving us some direction as far as, do you feel comfortable with having us moving forward with public outreach and continuing down the path of what we know are rate increases, but with this master plan in place, the rate increases are going to have a different aspect and look to it. So tonight, in addition to that guidance we're looking for, we want to go over through our process of the development of the master plan, very consistent with the 2015 outcome, but there's some big differences in this go around. There was some existing conditions and current infrastructure needs, so we had people actually come in and give assessments on that. Future condition and infrastructure recommendations, capital improvement plan. It does come with a lot of CIP needs, so we're going to walk through some funding options and financial impact, and then talk about our recommended path forward. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Project Manager Wesley.
Good evening. I am finally up here talking about this. It's been a while coming. So for the master plan, we took a whole bunch of information that consultants had developed for us for different studies and reports and as part of our on-call contract, and really compiled that information into the master plan. They did a lot of work on looking at existing conditions and recommendations for future improvements for things from electrical to, we talked about Water 102 to the condition assessment. We've, gone through a lot of this stuff with you already, but we compiled all that information into the master plan. It's pretty thick. You'll see the master plan itself is thick with a lot of appendices, and the main text in the front is really summarizing some of the existing information that our consultants have compiled. We engaged our staff. They are really the experts in our water system, how it operates, the condition of the assets, and what the shortcomings are. In fact, all of them are so interested, they showed up tonight, so they're in the back there. And we relied heavily on them for input into both what we need to improve and what we need to do in the future. One thing to note about the master plan, it is a high-level planning level document, so it doesn't go into how many pumps you should have. It goes into you need pumps. It doesn't talk about what is the treatment technology we're going to use. It says we need to make treatment improvements. And it's really intended to define a path forward so that we can get input from you all and from the residents and the customers on our path forward.
Back on that slide.
Sure.
I asked Travis this the other day, and maybe you can tell everybody else what SCADA is.
Oh, it's supervisory control and data acquisition. Basically, it's the controls. It tells things to gather data, water quality conditions, open and close things, just basically compiles information from the treatment plant as well as from distribution assets that have connections.
Automation and software
Yeah.
is great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All those reports too, I did want to point out, they're done by a variety of consultants. We didn't rely on a single consultant, and we did this purposefully because we wanted to get that difference of input and expertise from those folks to try to bring the best people of every area into the master plan. So it's organized, it's typical to a standard master plan. Why are we doing this? What information are we basing it on? What are our existing conditions and what does the future look like? And all that leads into how much does it cost? How are we going to pay for it? And how are we going to implement it? So it's kind of split up into those, story. Look at it like telling a story, and the story at the end is how are we going to implement what the recommendations are. Population and demand projections. This is that information that was presented by Harvey Economics. I've got the date, hold on. July of last year. So they came in here and did a study session and talked a lot about demand projections and population projections. This was the first time that we had done a real thorough update in a long time on that. And they went back and compiled data from places like the YMCA, from the schools, from the National Park Service, and took a real hard look at what growth rates are we really going to see in the Estes Park Service area. One thing to remember is our water service area is not the same as the town boundaries. So when you see numbers, they don't align with the town boundary because we serve outside of the town boundary. They had a high projection, high growth scenario and a low growth scenario. And they feel really strongly that the low growth scenario is kind of where we're going now. But we picked a midpoint between the two for planning purposes and kind of said, let's just take the midpoint between the low growth and the high growth scenario. With any projections, it's a forecast. So we do strongly also recommend that this is continuously updated, every few years, 5 years or so, when you look at master plan updates, that you're looking at population and growth projection updates. It is a critical part to sizing our infrastructure. So in Water 102, we did that one back in end of 2024. We talked a lot about our condition assessment, and this is a recap of that information. Not much has gotten better since then, so it's pretty much the same conditions what we presented at the end of the Water 102 session. Plants range from fair to poor condition. Glacier is the older plant. It's really at the end of its useful life. Mary's Lake is a rehab, and while it is newer than Glacier, it's still got limitations. Both plants are limited in redundancy. It's really difficult to add redundancy, additional treatment trains, or unit processes to the plants, basically because of their configuration in the setup. They both have a single source of water, so there is no water redundancy, and we talk a lot about that when we talk about reliability of treatment, that we need dual sources of water for the treatment plants. And then we had a chemical storage study done, and there were some improvements noted for both plants for how we manage and handle our chemicals, electrical grounding, and structural improvements. Distribution. The pipes, new pipes are obviously in great condition. Old pipes, not so much. About 35% or so of our system is older cast iron or galvanized pipe, and those break a lot. And I know pretty much every time I come up here, I talk about the tree, and we don't want to be a tree system. Well, we're still a tree system, and we want to do more looping. So that looping will help us with when we get those frequent breaks from the older pipes. We have a lot of varying pressures in our systems as well. Question we all talked about as we prepared this was, what does level of service mean? So that you see that noted in the third bullet under distribution. When we talk about level of service, we're saying how much pressure, how much water quality and quantity can you get at the tap? So we really want to make sure that when we have an issue in the system, we're not disrupting our level of service. We're not disrupting the ability to deliver water to our customers. Pumping and storage, our tanks are generally in moderate to poor condition. We will be bringing a project forward to you in the near future to replace the Thunder Mountain tank. We did a concrete assessment on that, and the concrete came back as deteriorating condition. And the consultant recommended that we plan for and prepare to replace that tank. Each of our pressure zones has a certain amount of storage in it, and all of them need a little more storage. Yes, Mayor?
On the pipe conditions, if like 35% of them are in the older category, something so macro like the Carriage Hills and that whole project, how many percentage does that bring us back into
I don't know
modern
the
days?
answer
Do we gain
for
5 or 6% back? Or?
Yeah, I don't know the answer for that. I will tell you that as we've done the construction in Carriage Hills, we've been actually surprised that the leaks were more significant than we thought. If you remember, we had a consultant that modeled it to do water loss analysis and came back and said they identified Carriage Hills as one of our areas of heaviest loss. But as we're digging, we see water running, from the pipes down the trench and so forth. So we're really happily surprised in a way because we are now replacing this leaking asset. So it was a good choice to do that project.
Yeah, when I read Travis's internal weekly report on the whole water section, it is surprising how many times there's a piece of that you're discovering is really falling apart. So yeah, good choice. Smart board for approving that.
Yes, that's it. Credit to you. So back to storage, we're looking for optimization and improvements in our overall storage capacity too. We also have to look to the future and what we think regulations are going to be. So as science increases, as we gain the ability to test for constituents to a lower and lower level, there tends to be regs that chase that. So we tend to talk a lot about what might be coming up. If you remember, Supervisor Callahan talked a lot about these different constituents in our Water 102 discussion. PFAS, I can't say it, she can, what it stands for, but it's basically a forever chemical. It's related to fire retardants and for waterproofing and things like that. Also draw your attention to the CEC one, that's contaminants of emerging concern. If you haven't picked it up, the water industry has a lot of acronyms. So contaminants of emerging concern. Those are man-made and naturally occurring pollutants, and they include things like pharmaceuticals and microplastics, and the one there, cyanotoxin. That is a contaminant that comes from blue-green algae. Now, we have not detected cyanotoxin or PFAS in our source water, but we do have to be prepared in the event that we do. So that ties back to that plant limitations and the ability to expand and add additional treatment units at both the facilities. I also want to point out the cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is not just access to billing data, hackers getting into our billing data and stuff like that. It's also getting into the water system itself. Could they do some nefarious act that we don't want them doing if they were to somehow gain access to our water SCADA and infrastructure? So we do have to be aware and constantly watching for cybersecurity, and that's an ever-changing thing. How do you prioritize all this? This is a lot to talk about. We talked about these in the past couple of study sessions that we've done, and then tremendous amount of needs in the water industry. We always focus first on public health and complying with the regs. So those are our first two areas, and then we balance everything else out. We've got redundancy concerns. We've got, drivers for resiliency, optimization, efficiency, et cetera. So really trying to get into balancing all that along with our financial limitations. So I think this is where Jason's going to come talk to you about the different alternatives that we looked at.
Good evening, Mayor and Board. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we looked at for treatment alternatives. What we wanted to assess was a variety of alternatives in our approach for water treatment options for the master plan. Some of these we looked at were alternative one, basically is saying keep the plants running as they are with little investment in long-term solutions and just maintaining that current infrastructure that we have. The second alternative we looked at was upgrading Mary's Lake to operate year-round by addressing items of significant need, which some of are providing a secondary raw water source, pre-treatment upgrades, improving the plant's redundancy and reliability, and then decommissioning Glacier Creek. Alternative three, we looked at upgrading Glacier Creek to operate year-round, which will require major rehabilitation of all areas of the water treatment plant. And then the second part of that alternative is improve Mary's Lake. Alternative four, replace Glacier Creek with a new treatment plant, including providing additional raw water sources, site reconfiguration, a redundant treated water connection, and then providing sanitary sewer, utility services out to that location. And then the second part of that, decommission Mary's Lake at the end of its useful life.
Mary's Lake is the newer of the plants, right?
Correct.
And it uses the whole filtering system where Glacier Creek is mostly chemical, right?
Well, yeah, some of that's correct. They both use the filtration. Glacier Creek has that's the older of the two plants. So that particular alternative that we looked at is replacing that Glacier Creek. So what we're trying to capture here is that we looked at all these different alternatives, obviously that some are better than the others, and I'm going to go into that here on the next slide. But, yeah, so decommissioning Mary's Lake at the end of its useful life with that option. And then Alternative 5, build a new water treatment plant for year-round operation with multiple raw water supplies, internal and external redundancies, in which meets current and future regulatory requirements and is expandable. And then the second part of that is continue to run Mary's Lake through the end of its useful life, and then decommission Glacier Creek water treatment plant. All right. So where we ended up with the summary of what these alternatives mean, alternative 1, basically status quo. We're just going to keep doing what we do. This does not meet the goals of having the goal of having at least one water treatment plant capable of operating year-round with an independent water source. Alternative 2, upgrading both existing plants to achieve required reliability, redundancy, and alternative supply as cost prohibitive. Alternative 3, delivering an alternative water supply and upgrading the Mary's Lake water treatment plant would require significant capital investment with additional costs driven by constructability and operational constraints. Option 4, while this alternative was evaluated during our treatment scenario planning, implementation would require major utility upgrades, development of an alternative raw water supply, and then also careful sequencing to maintain current operations during construction. When compared with other alternatives, the cost and implementation complexity of this made it less viable. Option 5, this option was selected as the recommended alternative through a collaborative planning process with staff. This option rose to the top because it delivers the best overall value, and when we look at cost, reliability, operations, long-term service needs, protection of public health, and service continuity. And also looking at meeting future and current and future regulatory requirements, which we've been touching on there.
Do we have any idea where a new plant would be?
Mayor, that's a great question. We are looking to utilize professional services for that, just to make sure that we give a full comprehensive evaluation of where that might best suit the town of Estes Park and meets these requirements that we're talking about. So, yeah, we'll go through that process once we get to that point in the design aspect. So.
Jason, can I ask you, I have a big question about a project that I thought was moving several years ago. And
sure.
Do you want to save questions till the end, or, because I think this is a Ruben question, not a Jason question.
Fire away. So, okay. Yes, we'll see what I can do.
Didn't we invest in the problem with the internet is that you look at one thing and then you look at 23 other things. So I have questions about lines and I have so many questions, but didn't the town buy land at the Y to rebuild Glacier? Work out some easements, buy some land? Wasn't there a plan? When I look back at the strategic plan, just in 21, the plan was to have Glacier Creek online, new Glacier Creek online by 26, water supply by 26. So it is 26. Yeah, what happened to that plan and that money and that plan? What
2015 master plan was essentially build a new plant, build redundancy to Mary's. The acquisition that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Whenever you have a water treatment plant, you need the security, the ability to have that space around and move around. So what we had at Glacier were, I think, 2 separate individual lots, and we didn't own the land in between them. So for example, the Kiowa storage tank system, we ended up having to buy that land. It was an outlot. We didn't own the land. We ended up, I think it was in 2012 or so, ended up buying that land so that we could put a fence around it. So similar to that, you're looking at the security around treatment plants, around your assets, because they are homeland security infrastructure needs. So having ownership of that whole area allows you to basically protect the area. secure
So
it better.
what the plan was not to do a glacier
The plan,
plant.
the plan included, keeping Glacier operating, working. And at that point, the discussion was, well, let's improve the pretreatment at Glacier. So that pretreatment planning went pretty far and included a pretty big plan. And it ended up going from $10 million project to $15 million project. But when you look at the master plan that was approved, it didn't include the idea that we were going to rebuild Glacier. The master plan was build a new plant or redundancy to Mary's. That boiled down to, a question of how much money do you want to invest in a plant that wasn't part of the master plan. And so this approach we're looking at this time is we're going to put a master plan out there. We're going to ask you to vote on it so that there is a understanding, a commitment to this is the master plan, this is the option we're moving forward with. So there's no question about how much money are we going to continue investing in items that don't align with the master plan. So yeah, you're right.
The part that's throwing me and that does not lining up with what you're telling me is that the strategic plan included the Glacier, a new plant. I had to print it but I can't read it now, but I did print it. Securing a raw water supply, and I don't want to argue with you.
Oh, no,
but
you
what
wanna-
catches my attention as a taxpayer and now decision maker is if there was a plan, what happened to it? And we know
I'll
that
have to
plans
review
evolve
that
and
because the
change.
2015 master plan was substantially the same. Build a new
Okay.
plan,
Yeah, I'll dig in more
raw
too.
water redundancy to Mary's.
Okay. We're not going to vote on it tonight. We don't vote on things in study sessions. I know you know that, but I want the public and the board to remember that we don't make decisions as a group in study sessions. I hope that you will glean information from our conversation, but that is a real burr under my saddle that it feels like sometimes decisions are made in study sessions and we're not approving this plan tonight. Am I speaking out of line, Attorney Kramer, as you take a bite there? Yeah, okay. I want to be really crystal clear with the community that we don't make decisions at study sessions.
Correct.
Thank you. And the other interesting thing there, remember the rabbit hole, internal distribution crew that can lay 1 mile of pipe a year was right underneath that secure a water supply and replace the Glacier Creek water treatment plant by 2026. So there have been some pretty big plans that we have not done, we have not completed. So I'm eagerly looking forward to the plan for the water department and for the community. However, it has not worked out before, so we need to be able to have a good plan that we can follow through on.
And a
I'll always
commitment from
point
the
out
town
that-
board to support that plan.
I'll always
Without a
point
doubt.
out that 2020 changed the world in terms of cost, supplies, staff, so many things. And I would have to think that had impact on progress on something this macro. Anyway, we are where we is, and good. Anything else for Ruben?
Yeah, Mayor, I've got a couple of questions just to understand the whole thing. No critique of any sort, but you said we only have one raw water supply. And I understand we have all these water rights. And what's the distinction between all our water rights and one source of raw water supply? What's that mean? I don't understand the difference there.
If you have a fire in a watershed and the fire makes the water untreatable, well, then that's your one source. The water rights, you can go to water court, get them moved around, say, okay, I'll take it out here instead of here. I'll replace it and put it back here. But the vulnerability that comes in with one watershed is essentially you're reliant on your treatment plant to be able to respond to any type of damage or conditions that change that one raw water source. So having two different perfect example is Loveland. There was a chemical spill in the Big Thompson, came down, Loveland was able to switch their sources while that chemical spill went through. So the biggest one, probably the biggest concern, was the Lawn Lake fire. The Lawn Lake fire came through, threatened the glacier watershed. Fortunately, it didn't happen. We had the other East Troublesome fire that came through, again, threatened the glacier watershed. And so that puts that one source at risk. Now you need to face that and decide
Okay,
whether you need
but
a
we get
different
raw
source.
water from the glacier basin area, but we also get it through the Adams Tunnel, right?
Correct.
Why
And so
isn't that two raw water sources?
Well, so you have one treatment plant, Mary's,
Yeah,
and the Bureau shuts the tunnel down. So now you're reliant on the glacier plant. So you don't have the capability of having one plant run all year round. So now you're basically putting all your eggs in the glacier plant, that it's going to run successfully, operate.
Right.
Because you have no option to use the Mary's plant. During spring runoff, you can't use the glacier plant.
right.
So you
Okay.
have to use the Mary's plant.
So that's more of a function of when you can use each plant. It's only really you get raw water from one source at any given time. Is that basically what you're saying? Sort of?
The challenge of ensuring that there is reliable supply of high quality water to our community is under a lot of stress, and fortunately we have great staff that have been successfully operating this way, but it's a N-1 or N+1, depending on which industry you're coming from, failure. So when the tunnel shut off, if there's something that happens with Glacier, we're in big trouble.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
During the spring runoff, if there's something that happens with Mary's, we're in big trouble.
Okay.
Well, it just so happens that the Bureau is switching their operations so that they shut the tunnel off in the springtime. So that creates even more stress.
So how do we get multiple raw water sources, given?
That's a very excellent question. Your only options are basically to pump something up to the Mary's Lake treatment plant, which is extremely expensive. We
Oh, I'll
looked into
bet,
that.
yeah.
Or get raw water from both the Glacier watershed or the Big Thompson watershed. At this point, that means pumping it up to the
Pumping it
glacier.
up,
That's
so,
about a mile
yeah.
away.
Yeah.
And there is one other option that we have verbally discussed is you can also bring the tunnel water down Aspen Brook into the Big Thompson area. So that we've also talked about a raw water pipe from the east portal to the glacier plant.
Okay, so that's a major challenge in this master plan itself, to figure out how to make that work, because you're not going to pump it up from Loveland, I presume. That's just not realistic.
No, and so some of the detailed engineering that goes into that, it's a cost analysis, it's a construction analysis, and then honestly, that is pretty much what we're talking about today. Is, well, if you're willing to give us direction to go forward, start making public outreach and moving forward with it, those are the next steps. The next steps are to fund the design and engineering work required to identify the costs and benefits. And
Okay, I've got a couple other questions. Thank you for that. Redundancy. I remember when this process started, we had a group that was a two-plant group and one that was a one-plant group. And I know Travis put himself on the two-plant group and obviously was unsuccessful in urging that. But be that as it may, how do you get redundancy within a single plant? Is it just a matter of, yeah,
I'll let Jason.
Yeah, I can touch on that we looked at a lot of the methods to do that. It's basically a backup with everything rather than having, if you look at it this way, of having a complete separate water treatment plant. You build things internally and externally that we kind of talked about as well. That means, how do we deliver water from a single water treatment plant? We don't want to have a point of critical failure. So you evaluate all those.
So it's sort of like having two water plants within one,
Well,
basically.
yeah, or maybe not quite that much, because that's,
Yeah.
I think, a little bit more expanded infrastructure than we would be looking at from a design aspect. But we didn't get that far into it. Like, we'd have specific numbers of it, but it's an additional, something along the lines of having an additional treatment train, so that if you have to take something off, either filters or some kind of process within the plant, take that offline, that there is a way to continue providing treatment with that redundancy. So it's an overall evaluation of how you build that plant. A lot of the modern
It's a design issue
plants
then.
are built that way. So you try to minimize your footprint and also have that, we call it internal redundancy.
One last question.
Yeah, it's basically evaluate, make sure you don't have any critical points of failure where if you have something break, you can't operate the plant or deliver water.
So one last question, and that relates to leakage in the distribution system. I know that had everything to do with why we did the Carriage Hills project. And I don't think I ever understood the cost benefit of that, because, you know, we put $3 million, I think, of town money into that. Admittedly, it was a town asset, but it was out of town. And so that has always kind of bothered me, but maybe we're saving so much that we're going to recoup that.
Yeah, Jackie's wanting to speak to that,
Jackie
but just,
probably- that's probably
she's
right.
welcome to, but I think that a large part of that is our reactive maintenance, the emergency response that
Yeah,
we have
it's
to respond
digging
with.
things up. It's not just the loss of water, right?
Right, it's
Yeah.
that time, overtime for the crews coming out, just repetitive, and I think there's a number out there with how many times that crews were responding to leaks in that area. So that was the targeted area identified by an engineering or consultant firm
So I
that said, hey,
presume
you got a lot of leaks here. This is a targeted area you should look at.
Do you have a
kind of thing.
time frame that you recoup that investment? I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to get at, the
I think,
cost benefits.
yeah, part of that's just that service reliability too, because
Well,
you're
sure,
shutting
that's part
water
of
off
it.
to people and they're having to drive around our equipment. I'll let Jackie finish talking, probably wants to add to that, but just things like that. We're pleased to add to that.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Trustee Brown. I know you had asked it before. It's really difficult with infrastructure to do a real true return on investment the way we traditionally think about it. So we're looking at things like the benefit cost analysis, and that's a process that EPA and FEMA use to look at whether a project is viable or not. So it considers not only the economic cost, but the social, environmental,
cost.
and those costs that go into it as well. I don't have a number to tell you right now what the cost benefit analysis of that is, but the impact to residents in the area is significant when there's breaks, and that is our highest area of line break.
Right.
Plus, we're wasting a valuable natural resource in our treated water. So there's the cost of treating it, but there's also the environmental of why are we
Sure.
just dumping water on the
You're
ground?
losing water.
Yeah. So, you know, when we come back to you with future projects, we are going to come back with a benefit cost discussion for each of them per your discussion when we brought this Carriage Hills project forward. So again, return on investment from an economic perspective, challenging, cost benefit, better way to look at infrastructure type of
Yeah,
projects.
I get that. It's not just cost benefit.
Yeah.
I certainly understand that, but I still would like to understand the cost benefit.
Sure.
Particularly on that Carriage Hills project, since
Yeah.
it's not in town property.
Yeah, and it's been a tremendously, as I mentioned before, tremendously more leakage than we even expected in that area. So as we're coming down Whispering Pines headed toward Ponderosa, and you know, each time you dig, there's more leakage that you're finding.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to that, I think, you know, if you think about that in terms of money, that a leak repair costs anywhere between $10,000 and $15,000 each one. So those can, you know, I don't have a quantity for you, but just if you want to think about what we're looking at, limiting that to, without me trying to get too far off into the weeds here with that. But hopefully that answers your question to a degree. So, all right, I'm going to continue with the presentation. So the next we're talking about our distribution system and storage improvement, what drives what we're looking at to as part of how we develop the master plan. So this part of the master plan focuses on being proactive with our distribution system and the finished water storage. We're shifting away from the break-fix approach by identifying critical points of failure, reducing reactive maintenance, maintaining regulatory compliance, our system capacity, and protecting our water quality. This plan evaluates the condition of our pipelines and storage facilities. It targets long-term pipe replacement cycle. That's about 100 years for ductile iron pipe. It also improves our system pressure and fire protection capabilities. We're also creating more looping in our system, which improves reliability and water quality. Just a little note, since 2020, we've installed 9 miles of new water main, which strengthens the system and reduces our future emergency repairs that we have to respond to. So what we're looking at for distribution storage for the capital improvements, looking ahead over the next 5 years, our distribution storage and capital improvement priorities focus on the most critical needs in the system. Jackie spoke to this earlier. The Thunder Mountain tank needs full replacement due to the progressive concrete failures. Its structural integrity of that tank can no longer be reliably restored. So we need to address that. And then the Big Thompson tank, we've talked about this again with Water 102, some of these things I'm going to talk about next. Additional storage is needed to support fire protection and improve our water quality. This tank serves that area serves a large pressure zone, and then we want to avoid investing any further capital into aging facilities in the Fall River corridor, which is part of that portion that the Big Thompson tank serves. The Fall River pump station is another one that's a critical point of failure. It's located now in a floodplain. It has limited redundancy, and the equipment is nearing the end of its useful life. We've also identified but not yet scheduled some things like the Craig's Crossing pipeline, which is currently an undersized galvanized pipe. In addition to this, several looping and pipeline replacement projects that we're planning on doing to improve water quality and that replace that aging infrastructure and strengthens our overall system reliability. So what's our plan? We are proposing in the near term over the next 3 years, beginning planning and design of the new water treatment plant and multiple raw water sources to that facility. And at the same time, we'll be continuing to optimize Mary's Lake while making only necessary investments at Glacier Creek that we're focused only on for regulatory compliance and operator safety until that plant can be decommissioned. We'll also move forward with design and construction of the Thunder Mountain tank, replace the Fall River pump station, and the Big Thompson tank. Midterm, that focus shifts to constructing the new water treatment plant, completing the Big Thompson tank, and continuing systematic pipeline replacement, strengthen our long-term system reliability. So, I'll turn it back to Project Manager Wesley to go through what the cost outlook is on this.
See, Jason saved the best part for me when I tell you how much it costs, right? So infrastructure is not cheap. These are planning level costs. They're in 2026 dollars, so they need to be escalated to the year of implementation. And they're also, keep in mind, planning level. So we did this based on dollars per gallon, that level of stuff. There's no design that helps support a detailed cost estimate. So as projects progress, this cost estimate does get refined. The new water treatment plant, redundant water supply, and associated distribution improvements range anywhere from 88 to 115 million. That's a lot of money. That means we need to go back and look at rates. So we are, you all have approved a contract with a rate consultant. They're in the process of doing work. We will be bringing back to you sometime this year a discussion on rates and what that means. And it's likely double-digit rate increases for a series of years, so it's pretty significant cost. This is not, it's a generational project as they define it, so this is a lot of money. We recognize that. We also want to zero in on that last item too, the pipe replacement program. Our infrastructure, Jason had that graph up, and if you think about Estes Park and their development, 1940s, 1950s, that stuff is 100 years old now. So pipe doesn't last forever. So we do also have to plan on what are we going to do to renew and replace our existing pipeline infrastructure. Estes is not that different from a lot of other places that have aging infrastructure and deteriorating conditions. So we're now facing, just like the rest of the water industry, significant costs. So you look like you're going to ask a question. No? Okay.
I've got a question.
Sure.
Do we anticipate that the cost will be amortized in such a way that it'll be covered by rate increases, or are we looking for other sources?
But I will talk a little bit about potential funding in just a second. Okay. So, you know, probably a lot of it will be rate-based, though.
I would think most of it.
Yeah. So anyway, let that sink in for a minute. Shocking numbers, high. What can we do to pay for stuff? We have talked about a couple of these funding sources with you in the past, and some of them, they all have pros and cons. Like everything else, there's some good side and some bad side. No matter what funding source or funding package we can come up with, assuming that we are doing something moving forward with water system, we would look to identify as many grants as possible that are suitable for Estes Park. Not every grant is great. Some of them have weird conditions and they make them not attractive. So we'll continue to look for grant opportunities. WIFIA is a funding mechanism administered through EPA. It's got some attractiveness to it. You can start repayment substantial years after construction is complete, and it lets you restructure the repayment so that you can pay a little less in the beginning and more later, things like that. With that comes impacts, though. Any delayed payments cost more money later on. You have to pay that. It also goes market rate, so it's not a discounted loan rate, and it's got federal requirements, means you got NEPA, BABA, we say BABA, Build American, Buy American requirements, and we've got AIS, American Iron and Steel requirements, so there's a lot of administrative pieces to that. And Davis-Bacon wage rates, so it does add cost from that administrative side. State revolving fund, we're currently using that funding mechanism for Carriage Hills. Again, it's got some of the same BABA and AIS requirements. It is a lower interest rate, so it does have a lower than market rate on that one, and some long-term options. Limited to 30 million, so it could not fund the plant by itself, so it'd have to be combined with other funding sources. USDA RD, we're using that one for Prospect Mountain, and it's got not the BABA, but it does have the AIS requirements and some administrative requirements. We're familiar with it. It's a long payback period, but none of these are perfect mechanisms. And then there's municipal revenue bonds, and there's some, again, pros and cons with those. We don't have to comply with the federal requirements or the BABA or AIS requirements, but then, you know, you may not get as attractive as a rate as you could under SRF. So we don't have a recommendation or these are just things we would continue to explore as we look for what we are needing funding for and as we refine what those cost estimates really are. And again, grants could be our friend and they could not be. A little more detail on path forward. Jason hit on these. So what we'd like to do this year is go out with the master plan. We have a plan for public outreach, and that's what we wanted to get your guidance and comments on that. So what we were talking about doing is upon completion of this rate study, make the plan available for public review and then have at least one public meeting before we bring it back to the board for adoption. We'd like to get your thoughts on what you all need for, we expect for public outreach though, and I'm going to stop and let you tell us now.
Ask the trails, the parks folks. They did a good job engaging people. And I think this is a very, very expensive, big plan, and it's the one that people are gonna look at in 10 years and look at their bill and say, what the heck happened?
Right.
Just like they do, after the fact, and you can't come to the night of the vote. I think that we need some time to reach out to the community. What are you thinking?
We were thinking 2 months. If we can go longer, if that's desired. We'd like to, though, really important that we get some sort of rate study before you this year, because we have not raised our rates since 2022, and it's not going to remain at the same cost. So we've got to come in with some, at least, rate
What do you think the time
information.
frame is on the rate study?
They're working on it now. We were hoping to bring it to you toward the end of summer, beginning of fall, for implementation in 2027.
And you think that the rate study should be in before we've approved this
No,
plan?
I think the board should approve the master plan before the rate study, but it'd be worthwhile to look at what their preliminary findings are on rates. We've given them this information, they've put it into their rate model, and they've spread things out and scrunched things up and changed things around, so they've got some ideas on, what we're looking at here. None of them are low rate increases, though.
Let's put that off as a taxpayer. But as a trustee, I would say we need to invest in it, and we need to confidently tell people what we're using the money for, and continuously raise rates to provide an increasing level of quality and service. So I'm not against it, but I do want to get a lot of public input. I think that this, my questions to you raise more questions for me. So I want to ask more questions, and I want to clear some things up on this about where we've put money, where we're going with this, and see that it's a complete plan that we can honor once we adopt it and we can move forward. So I would say at least a couple months.
Yeah, it's
But
a
I would
large,
like to have a target too of what that looks like coming back to the town.
yeah, and it's a large
From the
amount of
board.
money, and we recognize that, and, we all deal with that every day as well, so it's important that we do it with a lot of outreach and a lot of input and a lot of open, this is why we're doing it and what the purpose is, and so that people understand. We can't do nothing. Well, I guess we could, but that's not a good recommendation to
That's a
do
choice,
nothing.
Right. Okay, so do we think we're shooting for early summer to bring this back to the board to approve moving forward on what you're
That would
laying
be
out
the
here?
target, depending on, if we start getting a lot of public comment and a lot of public feedback, we may look at extending that input time. But we're really hoping to get some input from you all on what you would like to see from the public engagement side too.
Well, I'll take the challenge, but it's hard to get public input. So we have to be intentional, and I'm not sure what the answer is.
Okay.
But I think that we have to ask so no one can complain.
Sure.
I concur that we need a lot of public input. I was very impressed with the parks ability to get, the park department's ability to get input. And the thing about input, it's really a lot about educating the public about the need for this too.
Yeah.
Because people take utilities for granted. And so it's kind of a delicate case to make the case for why we have to do this, but why you're safe now. Because really, you've got to say both of those things as you go through that. But I think the education for the community is going to be critical, and I don't think there's any better way than to do it through a public engagement process. So I think that should be very robust, and if it takes longer, it takes longer.
Yeah, and we've done, in the last little while, we've done several newspaper articles, several different things that we've been trying to, what we call elevate the profile of utilities, to try to get out what we are. You see power guys are pretty visible, the water guys are not as visible. So people, again, take for granted you turn on the tap and there's your water. So what do we do to educate them on how that water comes out of their tap and why it's safe to drink?
I just can't concur enough with enough public engagement. I think one meeting is not enough by any means. Number one, we have people that have different work schedules. So we have to change timing of those meetings. I think it's actually a little easier for parks when they put up something at the park, but nobody's going to go to the water plant to see the thing to engage kind of thing. So I think that every time we do this, and we always ask for more and more public engagement, we can't get it. I think when people start realizing how much it's going to cost them on their bill, I think that's going to increase our public input. Yeah. And, even maybe go to some of the communities or have some of the information from the communities, like Glenwood, when they had the fire, how they almost lost their water completely. And people understand, I think people understand this year, especially with the lack of snow. And, you know, they're already worried a little bit about water there. And then the idea of wildfire, I think that people are starting to get it. So to use, not as threats, but just as, you know, these are scenarios that could happen. I think that's really important. And I think that will increase our public awareness of it.
There's a lot of public outreach and general information about water from AWWA, which is the American Water Works Association, and they have a lot of outreach programs as well. So we certainly look at and, you know, kind of use their guidance to help educate, and we will continue to look at what we can do to increase the public engagement specifically on this master plan, not just water in general.
Did you want to go first? Okay. Yeah, I think Bill touched a little bit on what one of my thoughts was, is how the education piece about how what we're talking about for much of our community is an investment for our future community. Like, you know, we might not see all of the benefit realized even in my own, you know, my time here. But what we're talking about is creating infrastructure that will last for generations to come. And so I think that's a key component, is understanding that it's really an investment. What you're buying now is for the future, not for right now. But I would say I'd be willing to have a later, well, I can speak now. Who knows if I would be up here when it comes back. But I would be willing to have it at a later date in order to allow for additional public engagement. In particular, I'd be interested in a lot of dialogue-based situations where, you know, whether you're going to Rotary or whether you're having some kind of like symposium in this room where there's a presentation like this, and then truly an opportunity for people to engage. And yeah, I think that it's a little limiting in terms of the number of people you can get to, because it requires them to be able to be there physically. But I fear that with a survey, there's just a lot of groundwork that you need to lay for people to truly, even for us. I mean, I spent a lot of time on this part of the packet, and I've been up here for 4 years, you know? So I think whatever allows for some of that dialogue to truly make it more educational, that would be appealing to me. And again, I think we will be faced with the decision of, we have to decide what's best for the future of our community and what we're responsible for 20 years from now. It would be helpful if we had the community part of understanding that with us, and not feeling like it's we're going against what they may not want, if that makes sense. So I think that piece of it's really valuable.
So Trustee Hazelton and other trustees, are you thinking that it's presentation style, open house, drop in, ask questions, learn lessons, or combinations?
Probably combinations for me.
Well, yeah, education seems to be the main thing here. And as I keep hearing about community input, well, dialogue's good because we have the opportunity for education. So I like what Trustee Hazelton was saying there. I mean, education is the majority of it. When I talk about community input, I'm sitting here thinking, well, what is the information? We're not going out and saying, well, talk to us about these 5 different options. Which one do you like best?
Right.
You know,
Which kind of treatment process do you want to
truly is
use?
for our experts here and for us to
Yeah.
help guide and make those decisions. So I'm not entirely sure what the end goal of the community input is, but the dialogue is good mostly for the education piece. People have to understand we're building a system we want to last for generations, as you say, and we're living on the edge. I'd like to have 3 redundancies too. Redundancy on redundancy would be a lovely kind of thing. That'd be $150 million or $200 million.
Right.
So you're still trying to find a doable path going forward. I have a sense of urgency on this. I don't like continuing to wait months or years and moving forward on something that I feel will take a long time, is very critical. We can't live without it. And I just hate the idea of getting in a crisis situation and we're all buying bottled water down at King Soopers or something, you know?
Well, and I don't think the education piece stops with the adoption of the master plan either. It has to continue beyond that because, again, people will see that on their bill for years to come. They need to know why and what the value of what they're paying for is. So even coming back this year for a rate increase doesn't mean we stop education. We continue to do that outreach and to make sure people understand what their water system really is. You know, when we did the Water 101 with you guys and showing you just even what the water division was made out of, I think that was, you know, step one in saying this is to the residents, this is what your water system really is. These are the people who work there and this is what they do.
Yeah, and it's, you know, obviously it's residential and business, and I know businesses, obviously we hear from residents, but businesses perhaps even more about the water, electricity, sanitation, and lodging taxes, whatever, you know, everything's going up, everything's higher than a lot of comparable towns and stuff, and so yeah, it's going to be tough to get that information to the level that we've got a collaborative citizenry with what we have to do here. It's way bigger than the police department. Three times, 4 times, whatever, of the cost, so it's a biggie.
Sure.
Okay.
Just a comment, and I think we've all kind of touched upon it. I don't know if we're really looking for input into like what kind of plants or whatever, because but it's more of buy-in.
Yeah,
You know, because if we're talking about the bigger price, like buy-in is much more important to me.
It is.
And you know, I would bet you 90% of the people in town, if not more, don't know where we get our water.
Right.
Don't know we have even the 2 plants. I mean, I think that 98% of people think we get our electrical from the plant by the lake.
They all say Excel.
Yeah. So I mean, it's the education and the buy-in, not I think I'd like 4 plants, or
Right.
you know, I'd like them to be blue. You know, that kind of stuff. But I definitely think the buy-in is more important.
Yeah. And touching on a few more things up there, you know, the rate study and the master plan are foremost for any of this to move forward. Assuming we will need to get a rate or a consultant selected for the Thunder Mountain tank replacement, because that is a failing infrastructure item that we need to replace. So we'll be bringing something back forward either this year or early next year on a replacement for that Thunder Mountain tank. And then Big Thompson tank replacement, again, start talking about what the consultant might look like for that Big Thompson tank replacement. And staff can't do this entire water master plan implementation of the new plant without consulting support. So at some point, we're going to come back and talk about a consultant to help us do things like identify potential sites, talk about details of the implementation planning and so forth. So that's kind of what we're looking at in 2026 is lay out what's the plan, kind of how are we going to do this, assuming that this is approved, how would we go about implementation? And then the remaining years are the implementation steps. So I think that goes back to, you know, get a good plan to start with, lay out what we need to do, and then have an approach to do it. And that's what we're going to try to use 2026 to do, is to try to lay out more details of that plan. Okay. Discussion?
I think, yeah, we covered the discussion part. Anything else from anyone there? I think we're good. Jason, Jackie, Ruben, thanks. Thanks for the back row support too. You folks being here indicates how important it is, because you probably worked all day too. So,
Yep.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
Important. We are at the end of the agenda, other than trustee and administrator future study session agenda items. Town administrator.
Only one tonight, Mayor. We would like to add, this is a 2026 strategic objective of the board, administrative regulations enforcement process. Remember last year we were developing a draft of that, and as part of implementing that, which is a 2026 objective, we want to come talk to you about what that looks like in practice.
Okay.
That's all I have.
I have a couple. I would like to ask whether the board would be amenable to a discussion that has been ripening relating to the Salud, UC Health, the Salud financial crisis. I've been approached by the CEO of Salud. I've exchanged notes with the UC Health CEO, and interestingly, they've put a whole bunch of money in this very new provider sustainability fund that the legislature created a year ago, and has a bunch of money for the federally qualified healthcare clinics like Salute and stuff. So at some point, like UC Health is helping fund that. But anyway, Salute might be able to make it at this point to the end of the year. They continue to try to do fundraising and everything, and they've approached us about the possibility of whether there is things that could be cobbled together with the Provider Sustainability Fund from UC Health, from the foundation, and even from the town. And they have even made reference to a couple possible sources, but it'll take a little more discussion. Can we do a study session on that in the not too far future? Are you guys okay with that?
I'd like to do it. I would suggest we put it in as a discussion item in the board meeting, because it gets a lot more attention in the board meeting than in the study session.
All right. Any other pushback on that? Only discussion.
Yeah.
First time around. Okay, the second one that I have is a very narrow and specific one approached by a single business that ran into a use of downtown parking lot for, and it's not an issue of parking, it's the fact that they've got vehicles, or they're operating a business out of a parking lot that doesn't fit the code. This is the EPK Adventure Rentals. They wrote to all of us like 4 or 5 months ago, Chris O'Neill and his wife Grace. I think the trustees received a letter from them asking whether we would consider looking at a potential amendment that would allow these three-wheel rentals. They look a lot like a motorcycle. You know what they are. I think most everybody knows what the Spiders are, and two-passenger kind of thing. And they basically rent them out. But right now, it looks like they wouldn't be able to operate this summer because it doesn't fit in the code. And that was discovered sometime here in recent months. Town administrator, when was that that it came up?
2023, Mayor. We informed the EPK that was not an allowable use downtown. Something got lost in translation, and this became an issue last year.
Yeah, they continued to operate somewhere, right? Downtown, yeah. Anyway, so it would be a very specific thing we'd be looking at. I think in terms of like the carousel and stuff, where we'd be talking a very limited type of thing. This is that is their business and the full extent of the business. You rent these things, you leave your car wherever the Spider was. And anyway, could we talk about that? There would have to be, in order to try to give them the opportunity to use the summer for this business, it'd have to come up fairly soon. I don't think it would be a really long discussion, but you never know. Any objection?
Yeah, I have some reservations about addressing a single business question to the board. I think that I have read the correspondence. I have looked into the issue. It sounds like a zoning issue. It sounds like there are rules that are preventing something that happened. So I think we may already be into more time than if one trustee or a couple trustees feel this is compelling to bring it to the board, that we add it to a meeting to have a conversation about it in an official stance, but to take a time in a study session to have a group conversation about one exception to one rule, I think is potentially setting a precedent for something that I don't know that we want to jump into. Now, that being said, there are a lot of questions I have about running my business downtown that I would like exceptions to. But I have followed the process. I think I would push back on that, to take a study session to discuss one item in a very narrow section.
I'd need a couple.
Even if I'm sympathetic.
Yeah, no, that's good. I'd need two other trustees to agree to take it forward to a study session to have a quorum here.
So I actually share Trustee Eigel's concerns, because I think of all the other entertainment type transportation things around town that are located outside of the downtown core, and they're the only one inside the downtown core. And I understand the concern, but, you know, these other businesses have been able to figure out how to do it by getting a space outside of the downtown core, and it just seems to me that they're asking for a special favor that we don't grant to others. I don't particularly mind having a discussion about it, but my initial reaction is that this is maybe not something we should do. But if the others feel otherwise, I'm fine with it. But I do have that resistance about it, that it just seems like it's a unique situation that is kind of, there are competitive businesses involved with this one in a way that I don't think was the case like with the carousel, for instance. So I'd be okay with having a discussion, but I'm not sure I would favor making any change.
I don't mind a discussion. I think that we've set a precedent already, that we've had individual businesses contact us and maybe later identify other businesses with a similar issue. But we've taken study session agenda items for specific business interests before. And so I don't mind a conversation. My concern is staff time that gets allotted to this. So I think if we were to do a study session item, I think I'd agree that I'd want it to be somewhat limited in
Compact.
yeah, and not, it's a super extended conversation. But I'm interested in what, I mean, if this were to open it up for other businesses, I don't think I fully understand
Right.
how the proposed text amendment that Chris had put out there may impact that. So maybe that's in and of itself worth a study session conversation, but I'm hesitant to dedicate a ton of staff time to it.
So I don't mind having a discussion, but I do think that we have to be careful about the wrong path. Like every business that has, and I'm not saying just because you talked about one does not mean we're gonna have like 100 people waiting in line to do it. But I actually agree with, not that actually, but I agree with Eigel in the fact that, we're talking about one business and would they follow the rules? Do they not? And we can discuss that in the thing. I just want to make sure that we're not going down that slippery post of everybody that has something with their business that they don't appreciate the rules are going to have a study session with the board. So, and I just think, yeah, so we have to, yeah. I still like the little guy that does that with the wind sign, but anyway, wind signs does affect a bunch of businesses, not really in just one, but I think we have to be very careful. And I don't mind having this discussion. I just don't want it to put us down the path of always discussing anything that a business doesn't like about one little rule.
Yeah, and, you know, we have had others, obviously,
Right.
like the bear bins and things like that. You know, stuff that would have a broader impact if you passed it. This might be fairly limited. So, yeah, I would say let's keep it compact. It sounded like there were 4 who were, well, let's go ahead and discuss with cautionary notes around it. And so if we can get that set up, that'd be okay.
Mayor, just to be sure I understood, the town funding for Salute item, the board would like to hear as a report and discussion item, not as a study session item. Is that correct?
Anything else? With that, this study session is adjourned. We'll be back at 7 p.m. sharp for the board meeting. Precedent.